The big news story in rugby league has, of course, been the Bulldogs' Good Friday clash with the Bunnies last week. Brett, it wasn't a great look for rugby league.
No, it wasn't. Obviously, they're a club that have been restoring their culture and their brand, I suppose, for about 5 or 6 years. You know, they turned it around. They were a club that was in distraught. Their fans are a very passionate fan base. You know, I played a couple of years at the Dogs and worked there as well, and they sincerely think that the club is their club, and that's what you want from your fans. You want to be very passionate and everything like that. But I think what happened was some of the players at the Dogs overstepped the mark, and which allowed some of the fans in the crowd to think that they could overstep the mark as well. And I think there was a lot of hatred built up in the last sort of 2 or 3 minutes of that game. There was two very correct decisions from the referees. So the Dogs players went off their heads about some things that I don't think they knew the rules upon. I don't think you can approach the officials in the manner that they did approach the officials. So obviously the Dogs had a lot of thinking over the weekend. They're going to certainly find the crowd, or the people in the crowd that played up. I think there's about 35 people that they're trying to seek over the next week or two to probably put some life bans on them. I think that'll be addressed by the club. I think the players need to address how they approach the officials from now on in the future. And I think the club itself have got to do a lot of hard work about restoring their brand again, because it's not how you treat officials. It's not how you want your fans to make other fans feel like they're coming. And there was a coward punch as well in the stadium, which hopefully that gets found out and gets more than life, and he'll spend some time in jail as well.
I saw Todd Greenberg on television last night. He's saying that he's been to some junior games and he sees this sort of thing from parents on the sideline. Isn't it a problem inherent in rugby league?
Well, it's a problem in rugby league because everyone looks at the senior players or the NRL players, and for years we've seen players give it to the officials. We've seen players mouth off at the officials. We've seen players, go and bully over the official. And until now, the NRL haven't made a stance. You know, we saw Chris Sandow last year make a comment to the ref that, are you having a bet on the game? And criticise the referee's judgment. Nothing was done to Chris Sandow throughout that time. So I think now the NRL have had to make a stance. They're knowing that what the fans and what the kids and what the parents see what the NRL players do, it does portray out in park football. So they're going to charge the players with some dissent. They're going to charge the players with 4 weeks for James Graham, but a little bit of that is the incident. 3 weeks for David Clemmer, and these are all early guilty pleas. So I think the NRL are making a stance. They're going to make sure that the officials are well looked after. I think the players themselves and the captains themselves need to turn around a little bit about how they're presenting themselves to the referees and the officials, because kids watch it, fans watch it, and they think they can carry on like it. So I think our brand has to sort of draw a line in the sand now. And I think if the first club or any of the clubs have the portray about going to the officials, shaking their hand, treating them with some respect, then I think their image themselves will be turned around rather quickly, and that's the image you want portrayed to the public.
James Graham, we saw he had that incident in the grand final a couple of years ago with that bite against the Storm, and now this on Friday. Is he the right man to lead the Bulldogs?
Oh, I think he is, yeah. He's a great Britain international. He's a great motivation and passionate leader, but I think he went over the top. I think you learn from your mistakes. If he does an incident like this again, I would think that the captaincy is gone for James Graham. I think he'll never have it again. So the players have got his support. I think James Graham's led by example, but we're sort of seeing what James Graham did a little bit to the referees is sort of what Des Hasler did a few weeks ago in the same sort of cross-field way off the field as well. So
Voldemort, wasn't it?
Yeah, Voldemort was sort of named. So I think there's a few things that they could have fixed. I think they have addressed that. I've heard Raylene Castle come out this week and say they've addressed a lot of issues, and obviously, unfortunately, there's always a line in the sand drawn, and the Dogs are the club that have got that line in the sand drawn. Yep. And at least from now on, we know what's happening. They've been happy to accept the guilty pleas as long as the NRL are happy to say this is the line in the sand as well. So we'll see what happens in the future, but I think players will respect officials with a lot more respect that they should have, and hopefully then you think that the fans will play a nicer role when they go to support a football game, because players aren't carrying on like idiots.
Just finally, if we see a repeat of what happened in the stands on Friday, is losing competition points a fair punishment?
I think it is, yeah. I think it's the only way to treat the fans, because a lot of the clubs, the wealthier clubs will pay a fine. The wealthier clubs will be easily able to handle a fine. As I said, the Dogs fans sincerely think the club is theirs. If you're a fan of a football club, you want them to win a grand final. So if you think taking 2 points off them is going to hurt them winning the grand final, then you might behave a bit more like you'd expect to behave in a football game. If a club's just going to pay a fine and nothing happens, well, I just don't think that holds you accountable as well when you're a fan in the crowd. So I think fining the club doesn't work. I think taking points off them is the only way we can go in the future.
There it is, some big problems for the Bulldogs address in the coming weeks.